Good morning, everybody. How are you today? I hope you're well. Oh, we've got a dry day and a little bit of sunshine. So I'm going to do a few things today, some down here and some at home. But today I want to basically make a video to show you all my stored produce, what I'm going to survive on from now until the first harvests next year will probably be May, when please I get my first broad beans. The broad beans are pretty much for me always excuse me, the first harvest of the year. Of course, between now and then there's a lot of stuff in the garden still, but I kind of think of that as being part of the previous year's harvest. So to start with, I'm just going to show you what I've got stored in the shed. Then we'll go home and I'll show you what I've got stored at home. Plus, in terms of the veggies I've grown and processed. Plus, I'm going to empty out my food cupboard. I have one little food cupboard at home. So we can see exactly where I'm at in terms of all the veggies, the stored stuff, plus the supplementary stuff that I buy, so things like rice and lentils. Obviously, I still have my lentils hanging that need to be threshed. When am I going to get around to it? My goodness. You know, it's crazy. Here we are in the middle of December. Actually, we're going into the second half of December. And I just feel like there are so many jobs outstanding still. I've got all the lavender to process, the lentils to process. You'll see in a minute I've got the rosemary and the sage to process. Never mind that. So we'll go home and do that, and then once I've shown you all that, right at the end I'm going to sit down with my log that I've kept this year of my harvests, what they would have cost me if I'd been buying them at the supermarket, and we'll do a little tot-up of how much I've spent in the garden this year to grow all this stuff, and B, how much I have grown in terms of value if it had all been purchased. Okay, so let's get on with looking at what's stored in the shed. Well, I should probably start by saying, please excuse the state of the place. It's an absolute pigsty. It's that time of year when, as soon as the job is done, I dump and run because it's so chilly. I just want to get home. So, a couple of things in the shed. Mainly, it's the onions. So these were all either tiddlers or ones where the necks snapped, so I couldn't string them. So I tend to use these first, because it's not ideal to store them all in a pile like this. So when I do take a few home, I always have a bit of a rummage in there just to make sure nothing is rotting. Oh, it's a happy sight, isn't it? So that's all the tiddlers. I'm using those first. And then to keep going right through till April next year, actually May, sorry. The thing about onions is I do harvest them individually before I come to do the big harvest. So I'll just have one or two out as and when I need them. So this lot will probably be finished by, about mid-April. I usually find, there's another few bunches, and obviously the ones that you're used to seeing behind my head as I'm chatting to you. Yeah, I usually find that I've got a gap each year of about 4 weeks between the middle of April and the middle of May where I have used up all of the previous year's onions, and the new year's onions aren't big enough to do anything with yet. I also have a load of onions at home. Yay! And then down here, like I say, forgive the mess. Oh my goodness, that's a load of rosemary. It's just propped there, it's drying, but I need to get that home. And then what I will do is I'll just strip all the leafy parts off the branches, and that will get hung in a cotton bag and stored and used as and when, and that will probably last me until about March or so next year. So I'll do another big prune in March. Then underneath that big box under there, that's all my, and the bag on the top, that's my main crop spuds in there. So they just sit happily in here over winter. If it looked like we were going to have a heavy freeze, I might take them home. But otherwise, I generally leave the spuds in here over winter. And they will probably last me, oh gosh, I would have thought they'll last me till sort of February or March next year. I don't eat a huge amount of potatoes, but I do like to have them. Lovely. You're right there, Miss Poppy. Having a little nibble. And that's pretty much it for stored produce in the shed. Of course, like I was mentioning, I've got all these bags hanging, and then there's some more up here. These are all lentils. I doubt I'll get much more than I don't know, 2 feeds out of this lot, but I will certainly be giving them a go. Oh, and there's another bag over there. That's lentils as well, I think. Are you lentils? Yes, you are. Right, so let me just bring you round a second. Oh, blah, where are you? Okay, so obviously, sorry, jingle, jangle, jingle. So it's just the onions and the potatoes in the shed. Oh, and there's some garlic as well. I've got all my garlic here. Then in the garden, I've also got, I won't show you again because you saw it in the last tour video, but I've got myriad brassicas, and most of them are cut and come again. So they should see me right through till March, April, most of them. And then the purple sprouting, as other things are finishing, the purple sprouting broccoli will take over, and that will see me right through till beginning of May. Plus carrots and parsnips and beetroots and chard. If it gets to the stage where I think I need the space, or I think they might get damaged by the weather, or they look like they might want to start bolting and going to flower, going to seed for next year, at that stage I'll have them out, get them all chopped up and put in the freezer, because by then my freezer will be much more empty. But speaking of freezers, let's go home and check out how bulging my freezers are. See you back at the flat. Well, I'm back at home. Now, this isn't a view I don't think I've ever shown you of my whole kitchen. And I thought, just before I show you the rest of the stored produce and what I'm going to manage to live on for the next 4 or 5 months, I have a quick word about the kitchen, because it's small. Obviously it's small. I live in a small flat. Having said that though, my kitchen is actually twice as big as some of the kitchens my friends have who live in 2 up, 2 down terraces. So it's basically from where you are in the doorway to the window, it's 4 metres, and it's a little over 2 metres wide. So when I moved in, it didn't have a kitchen at all. None of this existed. So when I was planning and then eventually building it, I knew that I wanted to have a galley kitchen. I wanted to have everything over here so that I could have a little table, sitting, eating area over here. And it's worked out brilliantly. And actually this counter comes out into the room quite a bit further than normal. It's not a standard countertop. I had it built extra deep so that I've got a lot of space, because I used to do a lot of baking and rolling out of pastry. I don't, because my oven's rubbish. It's also extra tall, so this side of the room, it actually eats into the kitchen more than a standard kitchen would, but it was definitely worth it. Brilliant. Now, in terms of cupboard space, so I've got a couple of little cupboards there behind the door, and that's where I stash all the bits of Tupperware and jars and all those things I use for storing things in the freezer. You'll see in a minute. So that cupboard's pretty much empty, and a little bit of space for some tins. Then oven, fridge, it's all built in, washing machine, under sink, freezer down at that end. So it's a small under counter freezer, and that's what I started with, and that was fine. and then I've just got a bit of open shelving there for my crockery. And honestly, for one person, that's perfectly adequate. That's all I need. So this is going back 15 years when I put this kitchen in. And that little under-counter freezer, it was fine because at that stage, of course, I didn't have a garden. I hadn't even dreamed, or I'd maybe dreamed, but not for this flat, for, you know, outside of London. At the time, I didn't dream that I would have a garden and I would be heading towards self-sufficiency. So one freezer did me fine. Then, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago? I think, no, it's about 2.5 years ago. I just stopped working. I invested in a second freezer down here because I knew that even though the freezer was going to cost me, I don't know, 150 quid or something, I knew that the amount of food I could grow and store in there, and therefore the amount of money I'd be saving by going and buying groceries, it would be well worth it. And it more than paid for itself within a couple of months. It's fantastic. Then last year, I decided that 2 freezers wasn't enough, so I ended up with a third freezer. So undoubtedly, it has shrunk the kitchen a bit. It feels a bit shrunken. So this table, this is where I do all my work. Here's my computer. I've got my pin board there with all my ideas and plans on, what have you. In terms of having friends over and sitting around the table to eat, it's just, there's not enough space. But, oh my goodness, so worth it. And I think it's one of those things, again, you know, I'm always talking about, sorry, I was just thinking of something else completely different for a second then, multitasking in my brain. I've got a small plot, but I grow tons and tons of food from it. I've got a small home, but I manage to make the most of every bit of space. I guess what I'm trying to say is, even if you live in a top floor attic flat, a teeny tiny top floor attic flat in the middle of a city, it is possible to live almost as if you were living on a beautiful small holding out there in the gorgeous Dorset countryside somewhere. So, without further ado, it's going to be a really tight squeeze to get me, you, and the camera and everything into the corner to try and show you what's in the freezers and all the beautiful stuff I've got to look forward to this winter. But come on, let's go and have a squeeze in the corner. Well, before I even try to get into the freezer, here are some of my squash. Oh, the colours are gorgeous, aren't they? So, where's my finger going to show you? This is my windowsill. Now the great thing is this side of the flat is north facing, so it actually stays relatively cool and they do fine. There's a few too many there. I also have a ton of them stashed under my bed, which I'm not going to show you because it's a mess in the other room. But in total I had 34 this year, plus I found a random, I think it was 8. I'd stashed some of last year's harvest in a cupboard and completely forgotten about them. So those I've been using up first. So I've got this year's 34 plus 1 from last year still left, so that's 35. That's more than enough to keep me going through the winter. It will keep me going until the next squash harvest. Right, I'm going to try and back you all up a bit. Actually, I'm going to turn you off to back you up because otherwise you're going to get seasick. Right then, let's have a nosy in the freezer. Freezer number 1. This is the bean freezer. Where am I going to be able to stand? Yeah, this is all beans. So, how much you can go? So, I often talk about these little takeaway tubs. The reason I love them so much is because, can you make that out? There's a back row and a front row. I can pack tons of them into here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, and then on the side where there's a random bit of space, I'll literally use any other Tupperware that will fit in. What did I say? 3, 6, 9, 18, 20. So there's 20 portions up here, and these are all weighed out. They're about 500 grams. So that's a little bit more than the equivalent of a tin of beans. So 20 tins of beans there. Oh. And then what I do over the course of the winter is, as the supplies get lower and lower, I start to transfer out of a freezer in order to turn a freezer off to defrost it. So pretty much the same again in here. This year I've actually had to write, that's for Coco de Pampol, because they look so similar to the Coco Sophie, I didn't want to get in a model. So again, all beans and then random little portion of, and that's Coco Sophie because it's not labelled, tucked into the side. This is, I've been having portions, this is a mixture of different kinds of beans. There's broad beans, that's chickpeas, green chickpeas. The very last of some green chickpeas. More Coco de Pampol, come here, my mother. Oh, there's all sorts in there. There's helder, runner beans, etc, etc. So let's say it's 20 per drawer. There's 3 drawers. That's the equivalent of 60 tins of beans. That's brilliant. Right, let's get it shot quickly. That's fab, because if I'm going to try and survive on all this for the next 5 months, 60 into 5, that's 3 portions per week. That's absolutely plenty for me. Right, let's come round to the other one. This is such a squeeze. Let's see if we can show you. Okay, so this freezer is all tomatoes. Oh, these drawers are quite a bit deeper and heavier. I think I'm going to have to come and stand here. I don't want it to fall out. But again, you can see how absolutely packed in they are. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deep in this one. So 5 times 6, so 30 odd in there. Slightly less in here where I've run out of Tupperware, so I've had to use some random bits of Tupperware. But there's probably another 5, 10, 50, maybe 20 in there. So that's about the equivalent of 50 tins of tomatoes. Great. The bottom drawer, oh, it's all steaming, so I don't think you'll be able to make out. The bottom drawer is all, I can't see anything, can you? It's all peppers. So, can't see through, can you? But that's, can you see that? That's du long de londe. This is orange bell. You can see where I picked a few just before they were ripe because they were all starting to get a bit attacked. But there's 5, 10, 50, oh no, there are 4, 8, plus 5, so there's 13 portions of pepper in there. Oh, let's get out of this corner for a second. Oh, it was a tight squeeze over there. Yeah, so what was I saying? Yes, so about 13 portions of pepper. That's fine. I don't use them in everything, not by any means, but they're just a nice addition occasionally. Then this freezer is the smallest one, so I will try and use everything in here first because it's getting a bit frosty, icy in the top here. It always does that. It's actually nearly empty already. So in the top, I don't know if you can make out. Oh, there's so much ice. But it's all, let's see, oh, there we go. It's all frozen fruit. So I go picking blackberries all over the place whenever I can. Occasionally the raspberries, that's if, oh, get back in there. If I'm watering someone's garden for them over the summer, they say to me, help yourself to raspberries. So that's, again, it's just tons and tons of frozen fruit. So all through the winter, I will have a little, not a huge portion, just a small portion of these out to have on my porridge in the morning. Also in here, I keep my cherry pip bag. Oh, it's so cold. These are great. This I use on my knee. If my knee's really swollen, I just drape it on my knee. I also use it on my head when I've got a migraine. That lives in there. And then the bottom drawer is the treats drawer. Yay! Also, just to say, where there are gaps, at the moment. As over the next couple of weeks when I'm cooking and making extra portions of something, they basically, wherever I've got a gap, I'll put a ready meal, as it were, my homemade ready meal. But in here, this is my shop bought treat drawer. Oh, actually, in the bottom, that's a portion of borscht, gorgeous. And then I've got a couple of boxes of these Linda McCartney pies. They're blooming gorgeous. So I've got 4 little pies there. Like I say, that's my treat drawer. Rarely gets a topping up. But I had a little bit of Christmas money early. So I went out and bought 2 boxes of pies for days when I haven't got anything ready made and I'm too pooper scooped to make anything. Right, that's the freezers. What's in the cupboard? This looks really weird to me. I've basically gathered together all my jars of, for example, stored beans, and then the few bits and bobs that I keep in my food cupboard. I've brought it all together to look at to see, wow, this is it for the next 4 or 5 months. Is it going to be enough? We'll see. So my store cupboard basics and favourites are brown rice, a little bit there. I love wild rice, but it was so expensive. So I've got that much rice, plus I do have another, is it cute? Yeah, I do have another 1 kilo bag of rice. That's brown rice. I've also got, this is risotto rice, and there's half a bag there, so that's probably about 1 kilo of risotto rice. So in total it's a little bit over 2 kilos of rice. I've got some lentils. Of course I've got the ones in my shed to thresh still, but I doubt there's going to be very much there. But that's about, I'm getting warm, that's about 400 grams of lentils. Also, what else have we got here? Oh, that's the very last of my pearl barley. I love pearl barley in my pumpkin and barley soup. That will probably do. I'm going to stretch that to make 2 pumpkin and barley soups. Each will do 4 servings, so 8 servings I'll get from that. That's the last of last year's flint corn, the very last of it. I've just got this year's off the cobs, so fantastic. Then what else? Oh, I've got some oats, just absolute bog standard rolled oats. That's for my porridge. That's not going to last me 5 months, no way. But oats are relatively inexpensive, so I will definitely be replenishing my oats for my breakfast. In the summer I have them whizzed up in the NutriBullet as a smoothie, but in the winter I love it as porridge. And again, economising, I would normally like to have it with soya milk or almond milk, but for now I'll be having it with water. But you know what, they swell up, there's a nice creaminess to them. By the time I've got some lovely fruit on the top, yum yum yum. A little tiny bit of flour. I hardly do any baking these days because of the oven. It's a rubbish oven. I'm not going to go into it. But yeah, a bit of flour. Not sure what I'll use it in yet, but it will get used at some point. Then, last of the dried beans. Of course, I have been having some already, but that's the beautiful Trail of Tears. This is probably, oh, it's probably a couple of kilos in there. The last of the borlotti. The last of, that's the rattle, you know what, and then a random mixed bunch, so that will do me. I've got tons more dried beans, but I'm going to divvy it out as seed saving and seed gifting, and then whatever's left over, they will be added to the store to eat, but I must do the seed saving first. Okay, so that's my dried stored stuff. Now, I have got a few tins that I keep in the cupboard, namely chickpeas. just because I can't trust the mice not to devastate my harvest. I need to check the dates on all of these because I hardly ever go in my food cupboard, believe it or not. I mean, I really don't, because I just live off my garden. But there's 5 tins of chickpeas, 1 tin of butter beans, that's in date, 2 tins of black beans, out of date, oh no, out of date. These are my kidney beans. This shows how little I use. Oh, that's it, 20, they're all right. 2018, oh my goodness, they're out of date. Like I say, it just shows how I don't rely on my food cupboard, I rely on the garden. So I've ended up with 5, 6, 7, I've got 8 tins of beans. But, remember back to the freezer, I've got the equivalent of 60 tins of beans in the freezer. I think I will I'll have a look at all the dates properly and make a note to self to use them. So yes, some pulses, some rice, I've got 2 bottles of wine, kindly gifted, Christmas, New Year, brilliant. The only other things really, these live in the fridge normally, that's the last of my pumpkin and sunflower seeds, but obviously every time I open up a squash, I'll save the seeds, and that's some milled linseed. So once these are gone, they're not going to be replaced, I'll just rely on whatever I can get out of one of my squash. Half a tin of, these are yeast flakes. These are a really good addition, especially if you're vegan, to get your B vitamins. Fabulous. Of course, doesn't every vegetarian have a thing of Marmite in their cupboard? Oh, I love Marmite. I've got to try and make that last though. And I've got a few more in there, but that's one of my jars of capers. Not a meal, I mean it's just an addition. So, goodness me, like I said, I can't believe I've got 4 tins out of date. Do you know, that really makes me cross, because firstly I hate waste, but secondly, if I'd spotted that sooner, I could have taken those to the food bank. I know some people will say they'll probably still be safe to eat, but I don't want to risk it. You know, I live on my own. If I poison myself, no one's going to know until my rotting body, causes such a stink my neighbours come up. Right then, okay, let's have a sit down. Oh, I know what I want to do now. I've done my maths of the value of my harvest this year so far. It's a bit unbelievable. Come on, let's have a sit down. Wow, it's really interesting to just look at everything together like that, isn't it? I'm sure there are folk out there who are thinking, there's no way that's enough food for 5 months. But, going on past experience, you know, apart from, like I said, I'll get some more oats, I may get 1 more bag of rice, but actually, you know, I'm vegetarian, I live on plants. So it's not like, you know, for instance, the fridge is empty, there's nothing in my fridge, apart from calendula oil. It's not like I need to go and buy butter or eggs or milk or any meat products, anything like that. I can survive on this. I can live perfectly well and healthily on this. Yay! I've got of everything. I've got a lot of squash, a lot of beans, a lot of tomatoes, a lot of onions. They're the basis of so many meals for me. They're all really versatile veg, they're all really tasty. I get all my lovely protein, or a lot of my lovely protein, from my beans. And don't forget, I've still got a whole bed of carrots, a whole bed of parsnips, a whole bed of broccoli, all that gorgeous kale, both the Cavolo Nero and the scarlet kale. I've got about 7 more cabbages to come. I've got all the chard, all the beetroot, all the celery. So I've got some really lovely, fresh, crunchy green and purple and orange stuff to come from the garden to supplement all this too. So, actually, you know what, I've had great fun doing this today, because I've never kind of taken a moment to try and see the whole picture. And now that I'm looking at it and looking in the freezers, I think, wow, the girl done good, yay! Oh, isn't it fantastic? You see, it just shows, doesn't it? My plot is a small plot. It's only a half plot. I worked it out the other day, it's 1/30th of an acre. You know, I see people out there who've got 1/3 of an acre going, isn't it fantastic that I'm self-sufficient? Try it on 1/30th of an acre. It can be done. I'm living proof of it. You know, I'm well, I'm healthy, and it's all down to eating fresh from my garden. Oh, it's brilliant. So yeah, I'm chuffed. I've got my little ready reckoner here. I've praise-seed it all on a sheet of paper. Now, I have been keeping notes through the year. It's not an exhaustive list, because what I was tending to do was, if I was doing a harvest for storing, either, you know, dried beans, green wet beans, tomatoes for bottling, what have you. I've got 16 bottles of tomatoes left as well. I'd forgotten about the bottled tomatoes. Yes, so this tot-up is from when I was doing big picks for storing. What I haven't done is kept a record of all the stuff that I was picking and eating. So in the summer, sorry, excuse me, there were a lot of times when I was, say, tomatoes, all the different salad leaves, even to a degree the rocking core, I didn't keep a record of those because I was just getting them home and scoffing them and then going, I forgot to weigh them. This also doesn't include, I've written myself a little list, it doesn't include the chard, cut and come again, but I'm just having it all the time. The celery, again, having it all the time. It doesn't include the beetroot, the cabbages, the kale, the broccoli, the carrots, the parsnips, the purple sprouting broccoli. It doesn't include anything that's currently in the garden. So it doesn't include anything in the garden, it doesn't include anything that I was eating over the summer, and it also doesn't include those few dried beans I may get from the seed saving. Let's not worry about those. However, the things I did weigh, this is really, really staggering, shocking. What I did was, as I was picking and weighing, I was looking to see what the current price was in the shops, because I eat seasonally. The price of a tomato in, say, August compared with the price of a tomato in December, they're more expensive in December, obviously. They're coming from heated and lit glass houses. The value of my harvest this year is just over £1,000. It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, I was looking at organic prices as opposed to non-organic, because my veg is organic, and because I've always gardened there organically. It's been 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 7 years. So if I was asking for organic certification, I think you have to garden organically for 5 years, or it might have been reduced to 3 years, I can't remember. But I am completely organic. It's organic seed, organic practices, etc., etc. So I looked at organic prices. Occasionally, for some of my veg, I couldn't find an organic equivalent, so I just went with what I could find. But that, to me, £1,000, just over, it's utterly staggering. And like I say, it doesn't include all the stuff to come over winter. So, I also totted up how much I've spent on the garden this year. I spent a bit more this year because I had to buy quite a lot of seed starting compost. I started more things in pots this year than I ever have done in the past. Lots more of my beans started in pots as opposed to the open ground, just because direct sowing I lose so much to the slugs. I thought it was worth investing. But anyway, cut to the point, Vivi. This year I spent just under £150 in the garden, and that includes my rent. It includes everything. So I've spent £3 per week. I've got to do some maths suddenly. £3 per week to produce £20 worth of food. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? Absolute no-brainer. And I will reiterate it, that cost, that £1,000 does not include a ton of stuff. I think I could probably call it more like, not quite half again, maybe I think I could probably call it £1,300. So I've just given myself hard maths, £26 a week. So yeah, a £3 per week investment to end up with £26 worth of food every week. Of course, there's a bit of an investment in terms of time and energy and knee ache, but my God, it's worth it. It's so worth it. So that's it. Now you've seen absolutely everything. You know what I'm going to be eating for the next few months. I hope you found that really interesting. I certainly have. The number crunching, the money, it's kind of shocking. I don't really care about that because all I care about is growing my own food. The joy that comes from that, the joy of being out in the garden, the joy of the other friends who I meet along the way. It's priceless, isn't it? It's absolutely priceless. And the really, really amazing thing is we're coming up now. I mean, I'm getting on towards having been without a wage for 3 years. That garden has, I'm going to get emotional. That garden is at the centre of what keeps me going. It keeps me going, obviously, with food, but more than that, it keeps me going in my spirit. I look forward to it every time. I wake up in the morning and I fantasize about time in the garden. Sometimes I don't get it because of the weather or busy doing other things, but yeah, aren't I lucky? I'm so, so lucky and blessed. I am about to get very emotional, so I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to say cheerio to you all for now. And here you go, here's a little challenge for you all next year. Why don't you have a little experiment and do what I did this year? Make a note of your harvest weights, make a note of the price of them in the shop at that time, because like I say, don't wait till the end of the year, because if you're doing it over the winter, prices will go up. So do it contemporaneously. Make a note of the weights, make a note of the price in the shops at that time. Make a note of what you spend as well. So your rent, some of you I know are lucky enough to have a garden, so you don't have to do the rent. But yeah, your rent, the cost of your seeds, the cost of compost, all of those things that you lay out. And let's meet back here in a year and compare, and I'm sure you will all be as blown away with your numbers as I am today by mine. Hallelujah! Right, I'm off to do some cooking. I'm suddenly hungry looking at all this food. I will see you all again really soon, I hope. But in the meantime, please take care of yourselves and go and have a quick visit to the garden. Bye.